Osiris is one of the world's best B&M inverted roller coasters. It's located just north of Paris, France at Parc Astérix. It opened in 2012, features 5 inversions, including a dive loop, a vertical loop, Immelman, and 2 0G rolls, and it features an Egyptian theme. Osiris is a play on words from Osiris, so they just replaced the S with a Z. Osiris is one of the gods from Egyptian mythology. He was the god of the underworld. He represents the afterlife, death, resurrection, and so naturally, the park has surrounded this ride in this awesome Egyptian theming. The presentation when you're walking up to Osiris is incredible, and likewise, the ride is just as good. This is gonna be my full in-depth review of the attraction. I'm gonna talk about everything so you can know what to expect when you go out to ride this thing, because trust me, you're gonna wanna do this roller coaster. I was so impressed. I mean, I would say that I had decently high expectations. I had heard great things about it, but I was just floored at the theming and then the very creative layout. This is a very unconventional roller coaster layout. B&M inverts tend to be very predictable. You start off with a drop, vertical loop, 0G roll, maybe an Immelman, then a corkscrew, and that's all great. There's a reason why all those rides have been very successful, because they work. But Osiris, being one of the later B&M inverts, some of those rides were built off in the 90s. This is one of the manufacturer's newest inverts, but it feels old school, which I don't know if I could say about some of these other newer B&M inverts, like you look at Banshee or Monster, Grunelund. I would say those rides do not feel the same as some of these older classic rides that we just love. But there's something different about Osiris. When a lot of people look at this ride, they think of another famous B&M invert coaster, this one being in Tampa, Florida at Busch Gardens, Montu. That also has an Egyptian theme, and in fact, it has the same color scheme, or at least it did. And after I walk through this full Osiris experience, I'll tell you which one at the end of the day I preferred. But what I really appreciate about Osiris is they said, screw it, we're gonna do a completely different order of elements that we haven't really seen before. Like I would say 90% of inverts, the vertical loop is either right after the drop or maybe after like an Immelman. In this case, the vertical loop is the third element on Osiris. After that drop, which does not feature a pre-drop, you know how those B&M inverts typically dip down and then swoop to the side? This one goes straight over, so that's the same as what we see on Banshee as well as Monster. So after that drop, you go into a dive loop and then an overbank turn. That's one of the oddities of this coaster. We then go into the vertical loop, followed by an Immelman. So same sort of thing as your dive loop, but now you're taking it from the other direction. We have another bank turn, and then you dive under the ground over some water. This tunnel dive is so cool. You actually get misted if you're sitting in the front row. For me, this was the most memorable moment of the ride. Not only is it awesome to watch, but actually is part of that ride experience. I mean, and it feels like a near miss too. This tunnel is pretty tight. If you stand facing the train like it's coming at you, some of the mist from the water will blow on you from the pathway. It's really quite cool. Immediately after that, we have a 0G roll and then a helix. This is probably the one moment of the ride that I would say has a little bit of a dead spot. Kind of during the second half of this helix, it like slows down a bit, but luckily it picks right back up. It does this little drop down. You're then below the ground just a little bit. You can see some of this rock work that they threw in there. You have your second 0G roll and then this high-speed bank turn right up against the ground. It actually reminds me of the element that Talon at Dorney Park does. You then rise up, then switch to the other side, and then slam into your brakes. So it's a pretty long ride. It doesn't share too many similarities with Montu. The order of the elements is completely unique to this roller coaster. In a lot of ways, it honestly reminded me of Nemesis at Alton Towers, because likewise, that one is a very unique layout, very unconventional, and it's also dressed up, it has a lot of cool theming. Nemesis has this dark, like alien theme. Osiris has this very grand feel. Like you walk up to the plaza, you have these fountains out front dancing. You have this massive station building. That's probably the main thing that you're looking at when you walk in. I wouldn't even say that it resembles a station building, but it's just beautiful. Like it has this amazing artwork out front, and the style that they went for is really cool. It's very cartoony, which fits in with the rest of the atmosphere at Parc Astérix, but also is still paying homage to that classic Egyptian mythology. And the colors work really well. That sandy tan incorporates into everything. I really like this centerpiece that you can walk all the way around. It blows Montu's theming out of the water. Like it's not even close. And that's just from the outside. Let's talk about the queue. First of all, this is a fairly long walk. The first part is all outside, but then once you go inside, that's where you get a lot of your great theming. So there's hieroglyphics everywhere. I love these funny little quirks, like you have this Egyptian dude dancing with some mummies, and then you'll see some statues later on, At one point, you'll literally walk through a sarcophagus, and then by the time you actually get to the station for the coaster, it is just beautiful. I love the shade of blue that they went with for the ceiling, very reminiscent of the sky. It is worth noting that when you go to ride Osiris, you'll more than likely be assigned a row. Sometimes they might accommodate your row request. If you can, I would recommend trying both the front row and the back. I like the back because of all the forces that it pulls. Like, it is just so intense back there. But I think the front is my favorite on Osiris. I feel like you can really appreciate all of the individual near misses up front, which is the same thing that I said on Nemesis. I thought Nemesis was so overrated after I took my first ever ride on it in the back row. And then after I rode it in the front, that layout just like kicked harder. I just love how low you're flying to the ground, especially with that helix there at the end. If you're sitting on the far left side, I mean, you're like right up against the ground. It's pretty cool. But yeah, definitely try both the front and the back if you can. Another thing I'll mention that is a little strange about this, on most every other ride at Parc Astérix, you actually ride with your loose articles. This includes roller coasters like Goudrix, which flips you upside down several times, but your bags aren't going anywhere. On Osiris, that's physically impossible. So what they do is they bring over a cart, you put all of your things in there, and then they wheel it out to the exit, and you pick it up in like that gift shop like photo area. It's the only ride as of right now that has that. I imagine Tutatis will have the same though. And while I'm talking about that exit, that's also where you'll find the single rider line. If Osiris has a long wait, definitely take advantage of that. I mean, think about it this way. You have 32 passengers per train, 4 per row. There's gonna be multiple instances when there are gonna be empty seats. So you won't be able to choose your seat, but if you're trying to get like multiple rides in on this thing, which I definitely recommend doing, that's the best way for you to experience that. But I think to wrap things up here, Osiris is awesome. The presentation of this roller coaster is just absolutely phenomenal. I hope you've been enjoying the footage that we shot of this thing. Filming this roller coaster was a blast. There's so many cool, unique angles of this. I love just being in the plaza. It was such a good atmosphere. I had almost just as much fun watching the roller coaster as I did riding it. And that's how you know that you did a good job. So for Osiris's final score, I'm giving it a 9 out of 10. Funny enough, this was actually not my favorite roller coaster in the park. I actually fully expected that it would be, and it wasn't. But not because Osiris didn't deliver. This roller coaster absolutely exceeded my expectations, but it just so happens that another ride here exceeded my expectations, even more so that ended up being my favorite. But man, this park is going to have such a solid top 3 when Tutatis opens. I can't wait for that thing. So that brings me to our invert rankings. Where do I place this thing? How do I think it stacks up? Well, I'm still not sure about worldwide, but it's definitely at least in the top 3 for inverts in Europe. I put it right up there with Black Mamba and Nemesis. But do I like it more than Montu? You know, I really had to think about this, but I do believe that Montu overall is the better roller coaster. I think it's whippier, it's more intense, but you know, Montu also has its dead spots. Towards the end, it can get a little slow there. What would have made Osiris better than Montu? You know, the best element on Montu does not exist on Osiris, and that's the Batwing. If Osiris had a moment like that, whew, I'd probably like this one more. I'll tell you what though, Osiris absolutely killed it in the theming. It's way better than Montu. I would kill to have a queue like this at Busch Gardens. It'd be so sweet. But I guess it just means that you'll have to go out to Parc Astérix yourself if you want to see this. Go get a couple rides in on Osiris. You'll have a blast and will not regret it at all. So let me know down in the comments below if you've been out to experience this thing, if you agree with the points that I brought up, if you think there's anything I missed or something you disagree with, please let me know down below. And stay tuned for more coaster reviews here at Coaster Studios, and I'll see you next time.